I begin this video essay in offering a personal anecdote. One I find awfully fitting for anyone who grew up leaning to the right politically, especially in a public school setting. What spurred this strange trip down memory lane was a video that had been making the rounds online. A TikTok video, no less. While I don't use the app, I certainly see a variety of its videos showing up on my timeline on Twitter. The video showed a typical American high school classroom setting, most likely a social studies or a history class, wherein the caption illustrates that the teacher's topic of discussion was that of feminism. As soon as that's announced, the camera begins to play the famous theme from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and focuses in on two individuals. One, a bright dyed-haired female, one of a stereotypical feminist appearance, and then zooming in on a suit-wearing, conservative high school boy who looks eager for a challenge. The video ends with the obvious implication that these two were going to go at it in argumentation. While humorous, and I'll give the TikTok credit for that, the first thing that came into my mind when watching it was that some things just never change. And with that, it felt like an image of a surrealist trip down to my own youth in my high school years that were now what feels like a lifetime ago. While certainly cringe-worthy and inducing now, I too was once a formal attire wearing, Thomas Sowell quoting, Ayn Rand reading conservative during my high school years. Growing up in an almost all-Hispanic city, it was a safe bet that the city of El Paso, Texas, that even the most center-right position politically was not going to be commonly encountered, let alone socialized in a public school system or culture. Of course, being the captain of my high school's debate team, I took joy in playing the devil's advocate, usually in classes ranging from psychology to history to English literature, often in a very 100-to-1 kind of matchup scenario. Having access to the texts and skills of basic polemics that garnered a few state and national accolades, I had enjoyed the ability to quote John Stuart Mill's On Liberty when necessary, deconstructing the sort of default Democrat position that was typically instilled and socialized into the classroom, whether deliberately by design or of the lesson plan or by the teacher's bias inadvertently. But with any debate, when it comes to those that we disagree with, it usually becomes, at first, trying to understand the raw basic observations as to how one thinks the world works and should work. Essentially, a conversation about one's first principles. First principles, or the fundamental concepts or assumptions of a theory, system, or method that is based on, are one's a priori observations of the world around them. They are a series of axioms based on the observations of the world around him or her and how they perceive it. It is the basis of the warrants and logical through lines for those axioms that come to define and establish our worldview. We most commonly assume the first principles of our parents, or at least the ones that they do their best to instill onto us, although the influence of socialization from teachers, classmates, friends, and extended family do often play a significant role in the development of these axiomatic presuppositions that define the way we look at the world around us, and its function in terms of our political views. But for many, unless one goes on an explicit political, spiritual, or otherwise transformative journey, these axioms are often never questioned, or at the very least never interrogated in ways that the average individual engages in. That is the nature of our low politics, barstool debates, and homeopathic politics, wherein our axiomatic presuppositions, preconceived notions rally around tribalistic straw men of our opposition, slogans, media-mediated communication of our current political discourse, and the Overton window. These are, of course, a very diluted understanding of the world around us, a scratched surface of our common layman view of the world, which in turn does very little for attaining the actual realization, if one can even attain that, or understanding of the world around us and the intricacies of power, politics, and human behavior and nature. It is what keeps many of us in adhering to a system that for the first time many now have come to the realization that it does not necessarily work or adequately represent their views or wills or desires as a people living within that system. Now, this is not just a criticism from the reactionary or dissident perspective, as there are many on the left who have held, or are recently coming to terms with this viewpoint as well. However, It is important for any movement, individual or idea, to engage beyond their own predetermined worldviews. One cannot simply regurgitate a position from rote memorization and presume that one's own audience or self will simply understand its meaning. In a conversation of first principles, one must be able to define as well as defend them. For the sake of argument and for this video, I want to take a look at the common observation I've seen from the right, in that our ideas and values will live on as they always have, and that despite the current nature of the political left and its discourse throughout the popular culture, it is the right that will last the test of time. That the right wing, as they like to use the term, is Lindy. So, what does Lindy mean? If you're like me, you've probably heard it before online in political discussion. It's a term that has been around for a while now and coincidentally meets its own definitions in terms of the use of the word. Lindy is derived from the term the Lindy effect, a concept that the future life expectancy of a technology, idea, or practice is proportional to their current age, so that every additional period of survival and use of said item or concept means, or at the very least implies, a longer remaining life expectancy for the item or concept. Essentially, the longer we use and adhere to a certain set of ideas due to their perceived timelessness, odds are they will fulfill this proscriptive view and be timeless by their very nature. It is often seen in terms of describing first principles on the right, or at the very least as some sort of reassuring, conciliatory white pill for fellow right-wingers. Fear not the anti-natalist rhetoric of those lefties not having kids in the name of climate change, for the desire of offspring and families is Lindy, and we shall overcome. Or that service and duty to God and community and not mindless hedonism is Lindy, so do not worry about those wanting to get in the pod and eat the bugs, for in the battle of ideas, these things are novel and will pass, but our teleological endeavors are timeless. And for many, that would be enough. At least for those already aware of the concept and the arguments being laid out with a rudimentary grounding in their own ideology. But for an outsider looking in, or for those wishing to engage in an explanation of first principles, would simply observe that Lindy is nothing more than a steelman of, or at the very least, is just argumentum ad antiquitatem in a more trendy veneer. Argumentum ad antiquitatem is the argument of the appeal to tradition, or the appeal to common existing practices. It is often cited as a logical fallacy in the structuring of one's argument, that the thesis is deemed correct because it is correlated with past tradition or present practices, that it is correct because it is something that has always been the case and will carry on. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, before I go on, I can already hear someone in the comments, or someone with a smarmy DM telling me that, the Prudentialist, wouldn't one claim that Lindy is a first principle, but it's simply just an adjective or a state of being in relation to one's first principles and perspective, especially on the right? And my response would be yes, that's true, which is why I think it's important that we do not allow ourselves to just simply state what we think these things are, and not engage our ideas and values. Reflexivity is important, and allowing ourselves the opportunity to learn and better engage with our ideas will not only help preserve them in the long run, but allow us to avoid the mischaracterization of these ideas and concepts as well. But I digress. Claims such as these above can be fallacious, and if, like with any argument or thesis, they are not developed further. For if you cannot prove the assumption, one's axiomatic presupposition, then one's assertion is without warrant or support. One must be able to articulate the grounds for why the tradition or common practice is to be around, or if the justification for that tradition still stands. After all, you have to be able to explain why something is Lindy as well, Lindy. It is explaining the perennial aspect of one's first principles that one can effectively demonstrate as to why. So often in the language or framework of liberation do we so commonly see on the left, values, traditions, and practices are often deemed to be outdated, from a time and place that has no real ground left in our modern, liberal society. It is the very inverse of the steelman I had been detailing, for it is the appeal to novelty. But if we are to have better discourse, whether internally within our own political communities or those with differing persuasions, we must be able to back up what we are willing to defend and believe in. Now, this may seem like an oddly redundant point to be making. Of course, you know the importance of being able to back up your claims. But rest assured, not everyone does. or like you listens to political YouTubers like myself, or reads a hefty amount of theory or texts from an era long past us. But in the nature of political discussions, the right wing must be able to explain its positions for some of the following reasons. 1. To make a clear distinction between ourselves and those of the political outgroup. Often we see in debate and conversations online in politics with the phrase, "It's not my job to educate you." This phrase, while often a cop-out for those who can't back out their assumptions, along with it being the lefty friend-enemy identifier, it leaves those genuinely wanting to know more frustrated with their positions, often being challenged without reasoning or simply left with more questions than answers. Being able to show your line of work and reasoning not only makes you a better speaker for your ideological position, but shows the audience member and participants a clear distinctive difference between yourself and those that may be engaging with the outgroup. 2. It offers the non-political audience, the unknowns who have yet to be determined as friend or foe, an alternative to what is seen as the default view or the most commonly socialized position. In a culture that is institutionally dominated by the left, it is important to offer a better worldview in practice. As I've said before, most positions cannot simply be defined by what they oppose. Being a leftist doesn't make you explicitly an anti-rightist, and vice versa. Taking your time to explain gives insight to those genuinely willing to engage in good faith. Good faith being the most important qualifier here, for without it the cause is almost all but certainly lost. To perhaps see past the logic constructed from what has been the culturally and institutionally imposed viewpoint. 3. To prevent the mischaracterization of your own position, principles, and more. Like with the aspect of pointing out hypocrisy, keeping an accurate record for both your own collective and to have a differing narrative from what currently exists is essential. Histories are varied and subjective things, determined by one's principles, worldview, and understanding of past events to what has led to where we are today. Offering these individuals the through lines and the actual work to get to where you are offers a chance to change their epistemological worldview that may have been greatly shaped by the definitions or narratives that were misrepresentative of your own. Simply put, I'm asking you, like any teacher would, to show your work. Now, don't look at me as some sort of instructor or provider of sage advice, for after all, no one on the internet knows that you're actually a dog. But in terms of showing your work logically, the benefits, especially within the realm of political discourse, both the in-group and the out-group are demonstrable. This is not only for the personal benefit for being able to be a better speaker of your position, but illustrates the capacity to argue in good faith, something I think that separates one from an individual participating in actual discourse and those who are simply along for the grift. Now, this is not a call for deconstruction or the elimination of one's ideas and values, but rather requiring the distinct know-how and understanding as to how one reaches the conclusion on those ideas and values. Like a young child looking at the world and turning to their parents, sometimes asking why can lead to a better understanding of the world around us. It spurs the development of one's growth and understanding, leading one down the path of self-actualization and helping them see their purpose and role in the world within their own framework, whether that's through Christ, service to others, or any other series of values, morals, and ideas. As for me, my days of playing the devil's advocate and being the smarmy contrarian of defending Scalia's rulings in my constitutional law class are certainly behind me. Although if I ever appear on camera, you can bet your bottom dollar I'll be wearing a shirt and tie at the very least. I'm not one to engage in internet blood sports, but I think having actual discussions, whether it's with individuals I tend to agree with or not, are vital for the growth and actual understanding of my own ideas and first principles. Many of the ideas and values on the right are very much indeed Lindy, but one must be able to articulate as to why. For after all, what's more Lindy than the ongoing quest for one's personal understanding of the world around them and self-improvement? Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I greatly appreciate sharing this video and others like it around, and encouraging others within the political sphere of YouTube to take a look at what I do. I want to get better at this, and to keep doing the hard work to get there. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Be prudent, everyone.